Hello, everybody. This is Frank. It is Iron Age news time again here on the South Florida Conservative News Center. January 6th, Tuesday, 9:30 a.m. And we're going to talk about Venezuela and the coalition that will be necessary to make this successful. People are already, mostly the Democrats, and of course, Senator Thune and a couple of the other sea suckers are saying nation building, nation building. It'll be Iraq, it'll be Afghanistan. Is it technically a nation building situation? Well, the nation's already there. You've just gotten rid of a communist dictator. All the facilities are in place. It does not have to be brought back from, ashes. There is already a constitution that was just ignored. There was a legal system that was just perverted. All that type of stuff is together. Unfortunately, the administration is pushing Maria Machado, Nobel Prize winner and cheerleader for the president, as kind of the titular head of the whole operation, which, as far as I can tell, she does not carry the nation in her pocket. This is going to have to be a coalition government until such time as they can have an election, which will not be that far out. And we'll have to just go from there. Obviously, with the amount of bad karma being thrown upon this thing by the Democratic Party in the United States, as well as Europe and, of course, China, which, real quick sidebar, remember when we realized how many American lawmakers were on the payroll of China? Remember that whole thing? Well, did they ever stop? Were they ever prosecuted? No. China stands to lose billions with a B of investment in Venezuela, basically in a bunch of legal shit, illegal shit, plus the embarrassment of having Nicolas Maduro talk about their quaint conversations about crime and about killing Americans with drugs. So they're really in a rock with a hard place. So they must muddy the water as much as possible. That being said, last question that came out, and I will only answer this as a non lawyer. Maduro pleaded not guilty. Everybody pleads not guilty unless they have a dead hooker in their lap when the police catch them. And even then, 90% of them plead not guilty. That doesn't mean anything. If we have to do a video on federal court procedure, I will hang myself. All right. So, no, it doesn't mean he's not guilty. He pled not guilty. He has not seen all of the charges against him. Well, he's starting to see it now. In discovery, they'll see the information that is available. And at some point, as I said, since he is probably a willing witness for the prosecution to burn down these other countries, he's going to just sit there and write his memoirs and get a few years, maybe 10 years on the outside, because his wife is going to hang on a couple things too. So we got that out of the way. Now let's talk about the important thing, which is this transition, because it has a timetable to it. All right. So we're going to get through all this nonsense that they're telling you in the news because they don't know shit. I have yet to see one major news person contact any of the individual Spanish language news services, and 90% of them don't speak Spanish themselves. So you have a lot of questions going on there is what the fuck do you guys really know about what you're talking about? Because they don't, especially Fox. So, well, CNN and all those go out saying, but Fox News has got to be one of the worst at this point. They're the worst. They're the frenemy that you don't need, right? So, what we're seeing here is this is not a fairy tale situation, okay? As we know. Granted, everybody is not protesting in the streets of Caracas. They're having a hell of a time because they know it's over. They know there's 20,000 million Marines off the coast and enough firepower to lay waste to most of South America. They know things are going to go right. Are there some extrajudicial killings still going on? Yeah, by the criminal element attached to the Communist Party. They will be dealt with. The ones that could get out have gotten out somehow with their bags of money, as the guy would say. The bad guys are vanishing, and democracy is not going to magically return because some of these bad guys couldn't get away. So Venezuela's reality is a bit messier than the Disney films. these institutions that are captured by the old regime, legitimacy fractured across factions, and you have criminal exposure hanging over most of the key players from the existing administration. So you can imagine what that's like, right? This is, like I said, very much more similar to Marshall Plan. I need the Nazis to run the power plant, or we'll have nobody to run the power plant. So what matters here is going to be balance. We're going to have to deal with constitutional legitimacy, popular mobilization, institutional continuity, and real accountability. So let's go through who matters, why they matter, who can't be included, and what successful transition looks like. With that being said, there is a longer form, more detailed version in little dossiers on everybody that we're talking about at www.southfloridaconservative.com, and you will know who to ridicule at the diner or the bar or wherever online about not knowing shit. My favorite is usually Senator Massey because he doesn't know shit about anything and says inflammatory things, which if it was against me, I would bring him into court anyway, even if you're not going to win based on the face. Let's run down it because this morning my Spanish isn't good, but Edmundo Gonzalez Urrutia, no, Urrutia, that's him. Gonzalez is how I'm going to call him, matters for one reason above all: legitimacy. And he's our number one guy. He is widely recognized internationally as the winner of Venezuela's 2024 election. That makes him the constitutional anchor of any transition that wants recognition, loans, or sanctions relief. He won the election, but they were using Dominion voting machines, hence he did not win the election because that's where they're from. He's not a firebrand. He doesn't command a mass movement, and that's kind of what is his thing. He's not the famous South American strongman addressing the troops from the upstairs window, okay? He's acceptable to foreign governments, multilateral lenders, they like him, technocrats inside the ministries, they like him, but he cannot govern alone. Without political muscles behind him, he's going to be a symbol. He is not going to be the government. You know, he'll be the benevolent whatever. Now, Maria Conchito Machado is the absolute opposite. She is the most effective mobilizer inside of Venezuela. She has courage, she has street cred, and she has enormous media visibility. But the hard truth is, she does not command a nationally governing majority on her own, regardless of having the Nobel Peace Prize and having spoken to President Trump. Nada, right? Her hardline posture scares the regime, especially embedded regime members and institutions whose cooperation is going to be necessary to prevent chaos. My Nazis in the power plant or in the water department, right? And when a transition becomes centered on one person, it's going to create a winner take all dynamic. And that's going to be when we're going to have insurgencies and sabotage. So we are not going to do that if we're smart. Maria Machado is going to be there, but she is not the lone wolf. She is not going to rule this place. If she does, I'll tell you right now, it's going to go right into this shit can. Okay? Her role is inside a collective executive. They're basically an executive board until they can get their act together because they are going to be under all the legal problems that old Venezuela had until they show that they can play nice with the rest of the world. So, sure, her job should be something in the political reform, the civic mobilization, anti-corruption is going to be the big one. Now, Juan Guaido, for those of you who have ever been in Miami for more than 20 seconds, Juan Guaido is a fixture over at Florida International University. Guaido still appears in discussions, like I said, in Miami and on television once in a while, where he has some level of diaspora influence. He's experienced where he tried to freeze the assets of some parts of the oil systems from Venezuela to some extent. And he is internationally known, a legal memory from that. But inside Venezuela, he's largely seen as it's over. You know, he's a previous chapter. His interim presidency collapsed not from bad intentions, but from lack of enforcement power. His future role, if any, is probably advisory or diplomatic, but not executive. Sorry, Juan. Don't get mad at me at the next cocktail party, but that's kind of how it is. But you know that anyway, you know? So the Maduro era power holders who still matter, this is going to be uncomfortable. And people, once again, I'll stick with my Nazis at the power plant thing. Delcy Rodriguez. Delcy Rodriguez represents institutional continuity. The courts, the ministries, the security, more importantly, the death squads, and all the other shit that's running around in the bushes, living at the beck and call of her previous boss and her boss's wife, who Delcy was like this with. Okay? She herself has been internationally sanctioned, but not currently indicted in the U.S. criminal court. You can look up what she did. None of it's good, but she is like this with the president, ex-president of Venezuela's wife, involved in some kind of hijinks. She herself was trying to sell Venezuelan gold out of the country to somebody, like in a suitcase behind the Waffle House. So why does that matter? Because in transition math, she controls the levers that keep the lights on. Remove her without a replacement, and you risk having bureaucratic paralysis. You have some of the elements that you would have had in an Iraq situation. So we don't need to do anything with her right now, even though her inclusion in the government is dangerous. You just have to keep an eye on her. That's why the Americans are staying, and that's why the Marines are in that raft across the horizon there, right? Sanctions and corruptions, allegations, poison legitimacy. If she is there at all, and I don't know how they're going to set this up, time limited, conditional, strict oversight, and she has no voting rights at all. She can say what she wants, but no voting rights at all for her. Jorge Rodriguez is not a public future leader. He's a regime tactician. He's useful only as an interlocutor, like that word, to unwind resistance, negotiate exits, and dissolve hardline opposition from within. And that is it. Once again, don't give this guy a vote. Vladimir Padrino Lopez. Every transition lives or dies on military neutrality. Padrino Lopez has long positioned himself as the guarantor of stability. He, of course, is sanctioned, but he's still influential, and he really ought to think what's going to go on. What was that in Sicario? You ought to be sitting down and concentrating on how you're going to live the rest of your life in the next couple of minutes or something like that. All these guys are probably having that backseat of the car in Sicario moment because that's what it's down to. Hell has come from Yankeetown. So he can't be a political leader in democratic Venezuela, but temporarily with civilian oversight, meaning our guys probably, he may serve as a security stabilizer, but not as a ruler. We are not going to have military overthrow of this thing, even if it's for 10 minutes. Okay. Now, who is absolutely out? No, no Moss, no nothing, right? Nicolas Maduro, obvious first person. U.S. narco terrorism charges. For some reason, something about him having machine guns. I have to laugh at that because he was in charge of an army, but somehow that's a charge. I guess I should represent him up in New York. He has no pathway back. He will never show up in this country of Venezuela again unless it's in a sack of ashes. Celia Flores, that's the wife, deep narcotics crew. She was involved in extortion. It was kidnapping people, all kinds of shit. Also out of the picture. Diosdado Cabela, repeatedly linked to the cartel. Him even showing up or taking a photograph in front of the building where this new organization is going to operate would collapse the legitimacy overnight. And my favorite name, Tarek El Asimi. He was sanctioned for narcotics trafficking and corruption, a prosecution candidate. not a negotiator, okay? Add to this list, there are sanctioned regime figures that are in the other list that are, you may not know them, but if you see those names being bandied around, they're all sanctioned and they're all on the hit list. So, separate who keeps order tomorrow for who owns democracy, earns democracy, legitimacy next, right? That's what this is all about. We have a very short stabilization phase followed by a real dramatic transition. And this is not from a government document. This is what estimating based on the political climate in the United States and in Europe. The only people who are trying to reinsert socialism in South America is the United States Democratic Party, any Mitch McConnell Republican senator, and of course the EU or NATO. That's who wants it. Oh, and Petro in Colombia, but nobody really cares what he wants to do, right? So run through this real quick for you because this is also in the on the page. But just so you know, when you're sitting there, the first 72 hours are vital. It's non-negotiable that these things are occurring. It should be. They have to have amnesty for peaceful political activity, end arbitrary detentions, ban the militias from policing and doing extrajudicial raping and killing, which is their thing, freeze discretionary spending, keep banking and payments running. So whoever needs to get paid has to get paid. And they should have something which would be a national continuity and non-reprisal order. It's kind of pretty boilerplate. You can look it up. You'll see what they are. We don't have a lot of time for that right now. I got things to do. Phase one, which is 0 to 30 days, this is occurring at the same time. National Stabilization Authority, depending what you want to call it. That's going to be small, hard to capture. It's time limited. A collective executive council, which is what we've been talking about. Representational form, constitutional legitimacy, which is Gonzalez, political mobilization, Machado, and another opposition person, technocrats, and civil society, plus a security oversight board to demobilize these irregular hit squads and political assholes. A public finance board controlling the PDVSA cash flow, which is the oil company. Anyone under major sanctions or credible narco terror exposure has to be excluded completely from these things. Okay. Phase two, day 30 to 180. That's got to be your Democratic Transition Authority. And this is where the legitimacy transfers. Independent Electoral Commission, a diaspora voting has to be restored. They used to be able to vote all over the world. They're going to have to get back to that. Fixed election calendar, transitional justice. You know, start getting the prosecutions together to prosecute the major crimes. Conditional leniency for lower level cooperation, meaning we won't cut their heads off. But see, this wouldn't be the United States handling this. This would be under the justice system of Venezuela as it existed before the communists. And there is plenty of copies of the books around to do it from. And also the lawyers are still around. So this is how you peel the bureaucracy away from the hardliners without us having to, get into a bloodbath as we would normally in South America. So phase three is 6 months to 2 years is the reconstruction. It's not ideological, no occupation language. It's going to be aid tied to performance, transparent oil revenue escrow, infrastructure first, power, hospitals, food supply, and judicial and security reform. Do not send the goddamn Delta Force down to train the army or the security forces. Again, we should have learned that after Mexico, but we did not. Okay? Don't do it. If you need to have police trained, send a policeman. Do not send any military special forces units down there to be dicking around and causing the next generation of problems, which they do. All right. Not that I don't support the military, but half of our problem has been we've set up ourselves against it. They used to tell you Batman made all of his own villains. So have we. Okay. Most of them. The Chinese, they can't talk about that so much. So Venezuela, like I said, they don't need another savior down there. They have Jesus. It needs a coalition that outlives personalities. You got to block the criminals from power, keep the state functioning, not descend into some kind of insurgency, because it would not be a civil war. It would be criminal gangs wandering the streets, fucking people up. They don't have the legitimacy for an insurgency. I say it, but I don't. It's not an insurgency. It would be criminal gangs going around shooting people. But we can't have that either. And the transitions that you see when they fail is when they crown one hero or one king, or they purge everybody at once, or they preserve criminals for stability. Eventually, that Nazi at the power plant is going to have to answer, but he doesn't have to answer today. Successful transition is coalitional, conditional, and time bound. If you're working on any of these things, you can do whatever you want. This is how we looked at it. Okay. So that's what should be going on now. If you hear anything other than that, if you hear that El Machado is the only way we're going to go, I don't think Rubio is that stupid. I think he has a very good sense of what's going to fly in South America. He knows who his enemies are down there, and his number one enemy is China. So he's going to have to figure all that out. But in the meantime, it wouldn't be bad for us to start rounding the Chinese and the Cubans and the Iranians up and putting them in a room in Cuba till we can figure out what they're really doing down there in Venezuela. So that's about all we have for now. 9:43, not bad time. So any questions, comments, please contact us. Somebody told me to say if you like this on YouTube, hit the like button. If you don't, I don't know what to tell you. And if it's on any of the other channels, sorry, there's nothing about Israel today because I know you guys love to hate it. But that's about all. So have a good day, and we're talking about Japan next. See you later.